Built to Move, a guide to boys' physical development and conditioning. Hello, and welcome to the Mothers of Boys podcast, or as we like to call it, the Mob. This is a place where we dive into real conversations with experts, offering advice, insights, and strategies to help moms navigate the fun, rewarding, and sometimes challenging world of raising boys. I'm Cheryl Bond.
And I'm Susie Shaw, and today's podcast is titled Built to Move, a guide to boys' physical development and conditioning.
Today's guest is Annie Carey Linton. Annie has her Master's of Education in Exercise Physiology from Temple University. She is a pediatric clinical exercise physiologist at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia and serves as a lifestyle medicine health coach for the Division of Cardiology and the Connective Tissue Disorder Program. She teaches strength conditioning TRX classes at her local Y and is a personal trainer and has taught as an adjunct professor at Eastern University, Cabrini, and Westchester University in their departments of exercise science. She has over 30 years of hands-on experience in clinical exercise physiology, specializing in pediatric healthcare, with a long-standing commitment to improving the health and well-being of children through movement and evidence-based care. Welcome, Annie. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi there. How are you?
Great. So you are sort of like a superhero mom with your kids are lucky to have someone with so much experience in exercise physiology.
I wouldn't go as far as saying superhero, but it's sort of a passion for myself and having that knowledge and being able to bring it to the table to my kids. It's been a great experience.
So Annie, can we just start off with, what is clinical exercise physiology?
Well, briefly, clinical exercise physiology is a healthcare specialization using exercise and physical activity to prevent, treat, and manage chronic conditions. And at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia, I work in the division of cardiology, in which we use exercise metabolic testing, which is basically stress testing, if you've heard of stress testing before, to assess current levels of fitness for children with congenital heart disease, as well as symptoms associated with exercise. Like sometimes we'll have kids that will come in that say, I had chest pain while I was playing soccer, or maybe I was short of breath when I was running at recess, so those type of symptomatic type of situations are what we assess the children with.
So what should parents know about how much physical activity their kids should have at different stages of development?
Right. Well, sure. So as like mother of boys, I've and girls as well, we know that from the get-go, the goal for any infant is to, you know, be able to prop them up, roll themselves over and crawl, sit up and crawl. And then we praise as parents, we praise every movement that they make. Like, yay, they did it. Oh my gosh. And then because we're so proud of them and we can't wait till they get to the next milestone. Now my first child, Kaylee, was born was a girl, and she was a preemie. So her milestones of sitting up, rolling over, and crawling were delayed for several months. But 17 months later, I have a son named Holden who was not a preemie. In fact, he came out of the womb looking around as if like he like owned the place. Um, he met his milestones a lot faster. He was sitting up, crawling, and climbing on my coffee table by 8 months and projecting himself off and thinking this was the funniest thing ever. And so having like his delay, my daughter's delay, and his advancement in milestones, it was like having twins, like thing one and thing two, running and wreaking havoc all over my house in the living room. So as far as when we talk about kids, as I said, from an infant standpoint, we just want them to meet their milestones, and our bodies are meant to move. So that when we ask what the appropriate amount of exercise babies, toddlers, kids, and teens should be doing, the quick answer to all of this is as much as they can. And I think that with most parents, we really grapple with like, well, how much is too much? how much is too little? What should we be doing with our kids? And with the childhood obesity being a chronic concern for parents, and Americans, there are guidelines that have been put forward for kids of all ages, according to the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. The physical activity guidelines for American states that like school age kids should at least be doing about 60 to 90 minutes a day of moderate to heavy exercise. And that, school age, we can go, is that a toddler? Because toddlers are moving around all the time. But what I want to emphasize is that moderate to heavy is where they're not just walking. They are getting their heart rate up, their breathing rate up, they're getting a little glistening with sweat. So that is really what the goal is when you talk about physical activity.
And so, Annie, when it comes to kids at different ages, what kinds of physical activities do you think are the most helpful or important for their development?
Aerobic exercise where you're using large muscle groups, and like for walking, running, biking, swimming, hiking, you know, anything like that, where we're also could also put in another category of sports, whether you're playing baseball, football, basketball, tennis, pickleball, which everybody's doing these days, and golf, soccer, lacrosse, you name it. All those sports are valuable in helping condition our kids. But one category that I think that is really, I wouldn't say overlooked, but it's less stressed for kids is strength training. And I think that strength training and conditioning is what I see personally as one of the most important activities that we can get our kids to participate in.
So, Annie, tell us what the difference is. What is weightlifting and strength training, and are they the same thing? Is that what you're suggesting?
I don't want to confuse strength training with weightlifting because I'm not suggesting that you go out and get play school baby weights for your toddlers, but young kids as young as 2 and 3 are already using their own body weight to move, groove, and learn physical skills that they're going to need for a lifetime. They stand, they push, they pull, they squat, they pull under the dog's tail. They're running up and down the steps, and all those are body weight exercise activities that are enhancing their growth and stamina.
Annie, can you share some unique or creative ideas for exercise that might not be widely known to help get kids moving?
Sure. Well, truth be told, that when my kids were really young, I used to try to make cleaning their room really, really fun. And I'd first let them jump on the bed for a little bit and say, "Hey, now it's time to clean the room." And while, believe it or not, jumping on bed can be very good exercise. And then the kids would say, "Yay, it's time to clean the room." And we'd like I'd say like, "Now get on your bellies and like crawl and get." Pick up all the clothes under your bed and, let's put them in, and we
Hmm.
play music and we kind of dance around, and but that lasted till about 4 or 5, and then they found other activities to do. So like if a toddler is watching his mom do yoga exercises in the living room, 9 times out of 10 that kid's going to get on the floor and try to do exactly what mommy's doing. And I think that just these types of uh, modeling for the kids is a really great way to get them to participate if you're willing to show them what to do.
So, Annie, in in my book, Mother's a Boy Survival Guide, I call my boys Ernest and Exuberance. And let's just say I didn't have much of a problem getting Exuberance to do all the exercising that he wanted to do. Ernest, on the other hand, was much happier doing quiet things. And so he would have been happy playing his Legos, not necessarily running around the house and doing the physical activity. And when it came time to get him involved in sports, it took a little bit more encouragement to get him to play soccer or those sort of activities. Do you have any suggestions for parents and moms for getting the Ernests of the world up and moving?
One thing that we hear so often is that my child doesn't like to do anything. All they want to be is on their computer. That's what they want to do. They don't like sports. They don't like this. They don't like that. And they're just very sedentary. And I think that, you know, that can create a predicament in the household, but it also can be a motivator. I did have a patient that I had worked with over the years. Actually, a couple years ago, he was probably a little overweight for his age. And he and his mom and I talked about, I was his working with him as his health coach. And we talked about the idea of what could he do in order to kind of get active. And she said, because he loves being on the computer. So we had discussed this idea of the virtual reality, like a VR system, because that he was getting for his birthday. And so when we talked together, along with the 11-year-old and his mom, we came up with this idea. He said there were two games that his friends had. It was called Ninja Fruit, which is where when you have those goggles on, there's fruits coming at you and you have to like slice it and kick it and punch it. And, it's a lot of movement. The other one he came up with was called Gorilla Tag, which I am assuming that you're playing tag with a gorilla, or I think you're being chased by a gorilla. I'm not exactly sure what it is, but we hadn't worked together for like a couple months, and when I saw him and we were talking, he had lost about 10 pounds. And I said, wow, what's going on? He's like, his mom said he plays gorilla tag every day and his friends, he has friends that like they go online and they all play together. So you can take what they like to do, which may be on the computer, and connect with their friends via the computer. Some of these games there's a lot of things out there that are actually really valuable and very helpful for kids to engage after school, or with each other on weekends, or a rainy day when that in-person meeting is impossible to happen.
So, Annie, can you offer some practical tips on incorporating more movement into the everyday routine when kids have a really full schedule with homework and classes and other things?
One thing we do know is that exercise gets the blood flowing. So it increases cognitive functioning, just like for attention, memory, it increases our neural connections. It boosts executive functioning of the brain, which is the planning and decision making part. And it releases stress that so many kids today have. And not to mention, it enhances motor skills such as balance and coordination with activities. And it also activates the brain regions for cognitive processes, which allows us to sort of do math homework, right? If they can take a break before they even like come home from school, put that half an hour before they even sit down and study, and just run around, get their blood flowing, it actually will enhance their ability um, to do their homework much better, and sometimes even more efficiently.
That makes sense.
So, Annie, I know you work with a variety of children of different ages. So, how do you motivate a child to exercise and become more interested in being active?
The first thing we really try to hone in on is, what is it that you like to do? Let's start with the SMART goals, which is an acronym for S is being specific, M is measurable, A is achievable, R is relevant, and T is time bound. And when they have control over what activity they have decided on, They're making the decisions. And the whole point of the SMART goals is that it's their idea, not yours. It's not my idea, and I'm not telling them what to do. They're actually coming up with the plan. They're coming up with the idea. And with kids especially, keeping the time bound part of it like short, like, okay, do you think you could do that for 1 week? Let's start with 1 week. And then you say, okay, well, how about for 2 weeks? And then we know that the more time goes by and they're continuing to do it, the more they're going to stick with it. So having SMART goals is really about goal setting for the individual, with them being the person in control.
So Annie, you're working with the child one on one, but how do you advise the parents to be when the child leaves you and they go home? Do you give them advice on what they should be doing until the next time the child sees you?
Yeah, as a health coach and also as a mother, I know for a fact that the more you pressure your kids to do something, the less they will want to do it. And I guess you could call that resistance training, right?
Mhm.
So finding what interests them, and asking them what ways they can get started gives the kids autonomy, to try something on their own. If they have a dog, do you think you could start being responsible for taking the dog for a walk? If they're not going to do a sport. I think it's important that parents are role models and not finger shakers, and say, you need to do this, because we know that kids want to feel in control. And when it comes to exercise, they will definitely feel much more energized, more likely to stick with an activity, and feel a lot better about themselves if they're the ones who set the goal, um, you know,
Mhm.
decided on what activity they were going to do. And they start to have a little more self-confidence in themselves when they've set goals, and they're able to achieve them. One of the things that we do say from a professional standpoint is to try to not uh, provide food rewards. Where every now and then it's okay, but giving you know
Ice
food,
cream or
ice creams and candies and things like
yeah.
that. And, some kids might just want the money.
Hmm.
If you exercise, I'll pay you, okay? My kids certainly did. But I
Yeah.
think I think that just finding some sort of balance in the reward system, and just even just personal satisfaction that they were able to do something, may just be enough for some of these kids to continue to participate.
Yeah, definitely. Well, there's plenty of research linking exercise to mental health. Have you noticed anything personally when you're dealing with your patients when it comes to mental health and wellness?
Absolutely. I can say for sure that I've been coaching with some of my kids for years, and the how they have transformed from these younger teens to these awesome like young adults has just been amazing. They're the ones making the decisions on what they're going to do, how they're going to exercise, how they're going to eat healthier, if they're going to get better sleep at night. So those are some of the goals that we work on. Even some kids, say I play too much video game. I want to slow down on that. I want to put that away. So I think that setting these goals and them making their own goals, and them achieving their own goals has been really just such a great thing to watch.
Yeah, it builds confidence.
Sure
They
does.
feel good about their decisions.
So, Annie, can you share any resources with our Mothers of Boys community?
Absolutely. So probably one of the best places to start would be at the where I work at the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. They have their own website. It's at chop.edu. Look up exercise apps. That's a great place to start. And in addition, that we often use Dareby.com exercises to give you some ideas of how to put together a little bit of a workout for your children.
Annie, we like to ask all our guests if you have a motto or a mantra that sums up how you think about this topic. Something that you come back to or something that you try to live by.
Yes, it would be stay as strong as you can for as long as you can.
Well, bravo.
Yeah, that's key. Well, thank you, Annie. This was so insightful, and I think you really provided a lot of great advice to our moms. I think particularly, the whole concept of parents trying to make the activities fun and having activities that you wouldn't normally consider exercise, having them be exercise and making them fun. And I think also it's important that the parents, like you said, set a good example themselves. And thank you all for joining us today. Follow The Mob on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and your favorite podcast platform. Be kind to yourselves, moms, and have a great week.